Okay, so before we get started really deep into this, I want to let you guys know that I hate death by PowerPoint, and so I will be engaging you for some feedback. That way we'll keep you engaged and you won't get bored. Go ahead. Okay, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Terry Brookins, retired hospital foreman. 28 years of doing what I love to do. This picture is of me and my first patient in Fallujah. I got to be lucky enough to go out with the Marines and give medical care to the women and children in the village of Fallujah. Since I have retired, my daughter is now giving birth to my third grandson, and my son is at MD3, stationed at Virginia, and I am, as of next week, I will hopefully be all done with my PhD except for my dissertation. What we're going to talk about is writing stellar evaluations on mediocre people. I'm here to talk to you about some difficulties we have in writing evaluations. What I want to accomplish is to get across how detrimental to the organization this can be. How I want to accomplish it is to give you the information that you can use in the future. And how it will help you, the audience, by giving you the information to spread in hopes that people will learn how to effectively write an evaluation. I want you all to think of an individual that you have known or seen who received a stellar evaluation, but yet they didn't deserve it. We're not going to state names, just situations, and we're going to talk about these instances a little bit later. The different reasons evaluations are written incorrectly that we are going to go over are the Peter Principle, mediocrity, unconscious bias, and motivation. We are going to have an open conversation in regards to challenges and how we can improve them. But before we get into the issue of stellar evaluations being written on mediocre people, let me tell you a little bit about IO psychology. What is IO psychology? The long name for it is industrial organizational psychology. In layman's terms, it's a study of the workplace where we have behavioral scientists that study the behavior in organizations and work settings. There are 3 different areas in IO psychology, or an IO psychologist can do. There's the researchers or the scientists, and they form theories and principles through the research. There's the practitioners or the consultants. They apply solutions from scientific knowledge that they develop. And then there are the teachers who train in research and application of the scientific knowledge. There are 2 parts of IO psychology, obviously the industrial side and the organizational side. The industrial side deals with job analysis, training, selection, and performance measurements and appraisals. The organizational side deals with motivation, work attitudes, leadership, structure, culture, and the processes of the organization. IO psychologists rely on diverse data sources including human judgments, historical databases, objective measures of work performances like sales volumes, questionnaires, and surveys. Some of the different things of what I call the subcultures of IO psychology include talent management, which is an organization's commitment to recruit, retain, and develop the most talented and superior employees available in the job market. There's coaching. Once you have that talent hired, then they need to be coached to work effectively within the organization. Assessment. In the Navy's case, we use evaluations to assess our sailors, but there's also all sorts of other kinds of assessment where you can assess a system to see where it may be broken. You can assess a workplace to see what is wrong, what's going wrong with it. Selection, this ties in with talent management, but basically hiring the right person for the right job. Training, those employees always need training, whether they've been in the system for just a few days or for 10 to 20 plus years. Organizational development, or OD, is a deliberately planned organization-wide effort to increase an organization's effectiveness and or efficiency and or enable the organization to achieve its strategic goals. leadership development. We do that every year with the new chiefs, don't we? Performance, your first thought might be evaluations again, but performance is more of a measurement, performance all around, and finding ways to improve it. And lastly, we have work-life balance, something we all know a lot about. Therefore, it's my responsibility to use research and apply it in a workplace to solve problems or issues. So, doing psychology in the workplace, we're going over that, and you'll find that as chiefs, we do a lot of what IO psychologists do. First, we're going to talk about the Peter Principle. Can someone read that for me, please?
A person who excels at his position is often rewarded with a higher position, eventually one that exceeds the employee's field of expertise.
So in my words, a person who is promoted that has no business being promoted because the position they were promoted to exceeds what they can do. Who has seen somebody promoted that wasn't ready or didn't have the ability to do it? Raise your hands, please.
Getting promoted to your level of incompetence, basically. You know.
That's basically everybody in the room. What did that person's former peers think of that person? Let's hear a few examples. So they were promoted to chief, let's say. What did their first classes think of them?
Well, not just telling people that wind up being promoted to chief that fail at being a chief or not looked at by their peers with very good first classes.
Right.
Asking us for guys who
Right.
skaters.
Skaters. What did other leadership think of that person? Come on, be honest.
It depends. If the person had the hookups with certain people, then they might have thought highly of it.
Some of them love.
Yeah.
Right. And that's maybe how they got there, right? Yeah. How did it affect the workplace?
Negatively.
Low morale, negativity,
Demoralizing.
demoralizing. These are all questions that I'm basing my dissertation on. The definition of mediocrity is the quality of something that is not very good, the quality or state of being mediocre. So here we have a few things that people think about because of mediocrity. How did that guy get promoted? You know the guy I mean. He's competent mostly, but never brilliant. He turns in work by deadline. He makes pleasant water cooler conversation and walks out at the stroke of 5. He's empathetically mediocre. Companies are afraid of the unknown. Some of the untried might prove to be exceptional, but among the untested, there will inevitably be many people who are worse than mediocre. So they're afraid to hire that person who they don't know anything about. The firm taking the gamble doesn't have so much to gain if the untested person turns out to be good. So in the end, it just makes more sense to hire a candidate that has a track record. Employers won't roll the dice. Long-term contracts could lessen the problem for entire industries because hiring companies can take a risk on a potential new talent without having to worry about the rising star that will be stolen away by the competitor. But there is little incentive for individual companies with an industry to switch their approach. So they don't want to change what they're doing. A matter of incentive. It is not obvious from the outside that a worker is achieving great things. He or she cannot quickly renegotiate their salary because they cannot go to a competing employer and show that they are really so good. And then perception is reality. We all heard this before, right? Unconscious bias. Did you know that less than 15% of American men are over 6 foot tall? We're going to talk a little bit about short man or Napoleon syndrome as an unconscious bias. Okay, of those 15% of American, yet almost 60% of corporate CEOs are over 6 foot tall. It gets worse. Less than 4% of American men are over 6'2". But yet, more than 36% of corporate CEOs are over 6'2". Why does this happen? Clearly, corporate board of directors do not, when conducting the CEO search, send out the message to get us the tall guy. And yet the numbers speak for themselves. In fact, when corrected for age and gender, an inch in height is worth approximately $789 per year in salary. Similar patterns are true for generals and admirals in the military, and even for presidents of the United States. The last elected president who was below the average was in 1896, and he was ridiculed in the press as a little boy, and that was William McKinley. So what is unconscious bias? We went over it a little bit here. It seems not only unfair, but patently absurd to choose a CEO because of his height. Just like it's unfair or absurd to give employees lower performance evaluations solely because they are overweight, or prescribe medical procedures to people more often because of their race, or to treat the same people differently because of their clothing, or even call boys out more than girls when they raise their hand in the classrooms. And yet all of these things continuously happen, and they are but a small sampling of hundreds of ways we make decisions every day in favor of one group. How do you stop it? Anybody know? Platform shoes.
Make Herb stand on his knees when he talks to me.
Well, basically we can't. That's why it's called unconscious bias. We're doing it unconsciously. We are not conscious of what we're doing, so scientists estimate that we are exposed to as many as 11 million pieces of information at any one time, but our brains can only functionally deal with about 40. So how do we filter out the rest? How is it we can walk down a busy street in New York with a virtual ocean of stimulus in front of us and still look for a specific person or thing? How can we have a conversation with a friend in the middle of thousands of people at a rock concert? We do it by developing a perceptual lens that filters out certain things and lets others in, depending on certain perceptions, interpretations, preferences, and yes, biases that we have adapted throughout our lives. As a result, these pre-established filters, things we see, we hear, and we interpret them differently than other people might. Or we might not even see them at all. In fact, our interpretations may be so far off that we have to question, how do we know what is real anyway? What are some different situations this has happened to you? Or have you seen it happen? Anybody?
Did you say 15% are over 6 foot? 1.5?
All right. Yeah, less than 15% of American men are over 6 foot. And 4% are over 6 foot 2. That doesn't make odds very well for us tall females.
We just gotta go for short men.
So, has anybody seen unconscious bias before? Has it happened to you at all? Nobody?
6 foot, maybe.
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 I mean, I think that sometimes you walk away and you look at a certain situation, maybe it's a job performance situation, and you see that someone is clearly the chosen one
Right.
by leadership with, and you shaking your head going, I don't understand it.
Right.
And I don't, what is that comment? What is, why were they selected?
Right.
Well, I can talk about, my personal life. I got custody of my kids. And when you say to someone, oh, I have custody of my kids, they wouldn't even think.
Right.
First off, a man would have custody. Because, so unconscious bias, I think, all the time,
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, so what are some specific problems you have come across in terms of writing evaluations? Well, we'll get into how we're going to fix them soon.
Or no brag sheet. If they can't talk about themselves.
How about so lack of information?
Lack of information.
Lack of information, because you may not know that sailor, right? What else?
So I think that's often the case. I think a lot of people do have a hard time, maybe that's a generalization, but I think people generally have a hard time talking about themselves. Maybe to, a guy to a girl is a different
Right.
subject, but in a performance setting, I think it's really hard to do that.
also about the fact of when you're actually writing the evaluation, and you know that maybe your CO wants it written a certain way, but you know that this person is not that way, right?
No, but I think that's where you gotta be willing to go in and have that conversation with us.
That's true.
You know, we've had, we just had one of those, had to have that discussion.
And ultimately, there's times where you agree to disagree, and you gotta draw that line in the sand.
Right.
And
And who is it gonna-
ultimately, the CO's gonna sign it.
Right,
So if the CO if that's the way he's wanting it, he's headstrong about it, then that's the way it's gonna be. Unless you put up that good argument that, well, X, Y, and Z is the reason why I'm saying what I'm saying, and kind of bring him to your side of it, the stuff that he may not, you as a supervisor, have seen, that he may not have seen or known of, that may not have been in the counseling or what have you.
right. And that's where I see a big problem, because they are ultimately the ones that sign it. And they may haven't had a conversation with this person on more than one occasion, and they really like this person. But they don't see what this person is really like in the workplace. Anything else?
Back to that, and that's why it's important as supervisors for you to document.
Yeah. Better be ready to back it up.
Because the more ammunition you have, the more it will have the CO kind of back down a little bit. Say, okay, well, I didn't realize all this was going on.
Right.
Or I knew that there were some issues that had been mentioned to me, but I didn't realize it expanded on all of this. So now I see where you're coming from.
Okay,
Well, I think we kind of overlooked the importance of midterm counselors.
right.
I mean, right there, I mean, they got problems there, they're gonna have problems 6 months from now.
Right.
You know, so if they're not addressed there. So,
Good. We'll talk about some theories. Being an Iowa psychologist, I have to use theories in going into places to fix their problems. First one is systems theory. My example of systems theory is, what is a system, first of all? A pile of sand is not a system, because if you take out one piece of that sand, it's still a pile of sand. Or a car, on the other hand, is a system. You take out the engine, is it going to work? No. You take out the alternator, is it going to start? Probably not.
Start by own church.
Right. So eventually, it's not going to work. So these will help in training people to write good evaluations too. So systems theory, you have to find out what in the system is broken. Obviously, we don't know specifically. There are numerous things that in our evaluation system that are broken, and we need to find out how to fix them, but we're not going to be able to fix them today. And writing evaluations, if you know that something's broken and you want to go fix it, there's called the change management theory. It's by Kurt Lewin. It's where you unfreeze, change, and freeze a behavior. It's used for diagnosing and managing change where positive and negative forces lead to and from a beneficial fact or behavior. So basically, you unfreeze by letting go of an old pattern. You change by making a new change. And then you have a new habit, and you want to freeze it again. I have an example. I have a coworker who is old school. She's a nursing assistant. She didn't work in the lab beforehand, but she works in the lab now. She knows how to draw blood, but on difficult patients, she likes to pull the fingertip off of her finger. So we needed to unfreeze that behavior. And by doing that, how I did it was go over with her about OSHA regulations, how it's going to benefit her, and then how it's going to protect her and protect the patient both. Every time that she would not pull out the finger, she would say, "Hey, Terry, I didn't pull out the finger." I'd say, "Good job." Or every time she did, I'd say, "Saw you pulled out the finger again." So that was our basis of change. That's how she knew. And eventually, over time, she made a habit of it not to pull out the finger because she knew that it was wrong by me pounding it in over and over again.
Sure.
Yes.
What are you referring to when you're saying pull off the fingers?
To feel. I'm sorry, I'm for phlebotomy, thank you. When you go to feel the vein,
Sometimes when
We
you
have-
get through the glove, it's better to get that finger right on it.
right, you sometimes can't feel it, but eventually, if you learn how to feel with gloves on, you eventually can feel. And then some people have it in their head that, I can never do that. Well, yes, you can. And this is how. So eventually she changed that habit of pulling out the tip of her finger in order to feel that vein. Okay, expectancy theory. Individuals will act a certain way because they are motivated based on a possible outcome. There are three different components: expectancy, instrumentality, and balance. Expectancy is the effort that leads to the performance. One's efforts will result in attainment of a desired performance. In order for the expectancy to be high, individuals must expect to have some sort of control over the outcome. Instrumentality is the belief that a person will receive a reward if the performance expectation is met. And valiance is the value that an individual places on the rewards based on their needs or goals. So expectancy theory can help managers understand how individuals are motivated to make decisions regarding various behavioral alternatives. So how can we use this to help us with our evaluation problem? In writing evaluations, how can we use the expectancy theory? Huh?
Are you referring to your expectations of that particular person?
Say you're teaching someone how to write evaluations.
Okay.
How can we use this theory to teach that person to write them correctly? To be
Have it
honest?
in the back of your head originally that that person's going to envision that person doing a good job of it, and then communicate, and then in your attitude towards that person, communicate it to that person,
Okay,
verbally and non-verbally.
right.
So communicating like the measurables, the who, the what, the where, the when, the how much.
Some of that's intangible too, though.
It is. It can be. However, this person that you're teaching, they expect something in return. So what are they going to get in return? When they write a good
Positive
evaluation,
feedback.
right?
Not gonna get a
It's true,
You're being
Well,
recorded.
what it gives them is just knowledge.
right?
I mean, at the end of the day, they just learn a new process.
Right.
I don't think that's, that's the reward from it, it's just the knowledge they get, then they can pass that on, so.
Okay, good point. Well, I'll get back to the next one. Path goal theory. The theory states that a leader's behavior is contingent to the satisfaction, motivation, and performance of his or her subordinates. It was revised later on, and it also argues that a leader engages in behaviors that complement subordinates' abilities and compensate for deficiencies. So, this isn't quite an example of the theory, but how does it make you feel when one of your sailors makes rank and you know that they deserve it?
Well, their success was in part your success if you were leading them along.
Right, and that's what this theory says. Do you think that someone who follows this theory is unknowingly a successful leader? There's no right or wrong answer,
It's one component of it.
right? There's no right or wrong answer. They can be a successful leader still because they want their sailors to be great sailors. And them helping them do that makes them happy, right? Experiential training theory by David Cole. It is learning from experience. It consists of four-stage cyclical theory of learning that combines experience, perception, cognition, and behavior. The four stages are concrete experience, abstract conceptualization, reflective observation, and active experimentation. Concrete experience is the basis of the reflection. The reflection makes the person think of new possibilities or implications, and the new possibilities or implications can be tested. I'm supposed to explain to you about the cheese training. Every year we get new guidelines from the MCPON. So putting this theory into place, the first stage is the concrete experience. So we know what we've done in the past. Then we have to think about the new guidelines and reflect on them and what we might have to change. And then we have to brainstorm. That's the abstract conceptualization. And then we have to test them.
Unit ACFL, muster and supply. Unit ACFL, muster and supply.
And the last one is the adult learning theory. Knowles identifies 6 principles of adult learning theory. Adults are internally motivated and self-directed. Adults bring life experiences and knowledge to the learning experiences. Adults are goal-oriented. They are relevancy-oriented. They are practical. They like to be respected. So that could be one last theory that you can use to teach people how to write evaluations. So remember back in the beginning when I asked you to think of that situation where somebody was written a stellar evaluation, but yet they were mediocre. Can we talk a little bit about one of those examples?
Without naming names.
Without naming names.
I think it oftentimes comes when you're in a leadership position, when you feel it's your responsibility to bring others up, and you think by doing that they'll raise the occasion. And I think that's what I've seen with the particular example that I experienced. That is seeing a mediocre sailor that was on the verge of being kicked out, but then leadership saw something or believed in this person and then set the stage for them to be successful by having others cover for them in their underperformance. And they were allowed to get capped, if you will, but because they were given these other opportunities that the others weren't because they were performing. So that's the kind of the scenario that I saw.
So how could we have done that differently?
From my perspective, I feel on some of those issues it could have helped by speaking out about some of the things that I saw. Instead of being silent. But that's kind of some of the, that's the difficult dynamic when you're dealing with reserve component versus active component.
Right.
And as an IA, and that was my situation. I'm an IA reservist, put into an active duty world. I'm the odd man out. And you see things, but I'm the reservist.
Right.
So they said, in hindsight, after years of experience, I would have handled things a little differently, or maybe would have been a little bit more bold, maybe would have been a little bit more outspoken and pointed some things out. Or I could have seen the plan, what the first class or the chief was trying to accomplish with this particular sailor, come alongside and try to assume some sort of a leadership role with them. But it's hard when you're peers, you're on the same level.
Right.
Because at that time I was in 4,
Gotcha.
so sailor was in 4.
Gotcha. Yes.
Well, all right, just to piggyback on what you say. Writing eval. Unless you're signing that eval, you don't have final say.
Right.
So you can write this guy a great eval, but it's not my signature that's gonna go for it. I'm not the final chop on it. So this whole system, I mean, I get what you're saying that, you write eval and the person sucks, but he still gets promoted well. Even if you do your job as the chief, we're still not the end. I mean, it's up to the CEO, it's up to the master chief or the XO. Everybody gets a cut.
Right.
So, I don't know, I mean.
Well, but I think that's a lot of the issue is there's too many people out there that don't want to be the bad guy and don't want to do the truth of reporting.
Yeah.
And you run into that. I mean, you know, we've had people here that got good evaluations that were mediocre sailors. And, you know, what can you do differently? The bottom line is you have to affect the culture change. You have to push that reporting senior, whether it's the XO or the CO or whatever, and show them, you know, you're talking about, you know, voicing all those. You have to show them all that documentation. You have to make that culture change and say, you're in a position of leadership for a reason. You have to make these hard decisions. You can't always be the good guy.
Right.
And document this stuff and show them where if they keep doing these stellar evaluations, the long-term effects. And, you know, that's one of the things that I had to do with one of the guys here, with the CO, is, you know, he wasn't gonna see it based on this. We had to show him what could happen down the road. You know, forget about the counselings and everything else. It was that big picture that if you do this, then he's going to advance.
Right.
When he advances, this is what's gonna happen. And it was that, that light bulb going off that, you know what, I never looked at it that way.
Right.
So, I mean, at the end, that's what you do differently, is you have to figure out what's going to get the point across to make that evaluation on that mediocre sailor be effective.
Okay, I got you, Master Chief, but still, if you can't affect change on the top three, then.
Have we done it?
Yeah. Huh?
Have we done it?
Well, we're talking about, we're not,
Yeah, but
okay, we
it's-
done it here, but we're talking about overall.
Well,
I
but
mean,
that's the thing. You have to have these strong people there that can go in there and make those cases. And sometimes it's hard, and sometimes you have to be, you know, projecting out. You can't, maybe it's not this cycle that we're gonna make that change, but we've planted the seeds. So the next cycle, or the next group, you know, it's the, you know, choose your battles, so you may lose the battle, but you can win the war.
I think the underlying problem, though, is there's a deficit in leadership courage. It's easier, they don't want to be the one to call it as it is. They don't want to make waves. They don't want to upset this person. They don't want to lay this person out. So it's easier to write the good eval and pass the problem along.
Oh, it is. That's very much the
That's
problem.
society now,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah,
Don't-
yeah. I'm okay, you're okay, we're all okay.
Yeah, don't speak your kids because it may hurt them.
One of the biggest things I see, they don't want to present it. And I've been the guy who says, hey, I'm going to do the presenting. If you write it this way, I'll present it. I'll be the bad guy. I don't mind being the bad guy. Because the message has to be said. I've had to do it for my whole team when there was civilian time. I just took all of them. You know, and I went in and took up and gave all the bad emails. I just know, how can you do this? I said, well, somebody's got to do it.
Right.
Well, that's some of the stuff that you learn, I think, as a chief, you know, sometimes the right thing is to be the bad guy.
Right.
You know, because that's really the fairness in it. Because there are always going to be mediocre sailors.
Right.
And then you're going to have your stellar performer. And, you know, sorry, you can't be liked when you're in a leadership position. It's not all about being happy and smiling at everyone next to you.
So there is a couple of studies done on evaluations. First one is the negativity and positivity and performance evaluations. I'm just going to go over them really quick. I do have them if you are interested in reading them. I can make copies for you. Findings of this article indicate that performance evaluations tend to be conjunctive. That is, more weight is given to negative attributes than to positive attributes. However, this basic tendency disappears when overall level of evaluation is high as a result of inconsistency resolution. So in your words, what are they trying to say here?
The bad outweighs the good a lot of the times when you're doing an eval. You're gonna focus more on what they did wrong rather than what they did right.
Unless they were that stellar sailor. But it's the one rater is rating all these different people and it doesn't come out white to be right.
Yeah, sometimes that single person perspective is completely skewed because they only see it from their platform.
Exactly. The next one is greater confidence in social influence and performance appraisals. Evaluation information supplied by highly confident extreme raters significantly influences evaluations from non-interactive novice raters, but only minimally influences evaluations from interactive novice raters. So you're trying to teach somebody, they're not interactive with the people, they're gonna take that information to heart, where the person who is interactive with the people are gonna say no. What do you think about that? Want me to repeat it?
Yeah. one more time.
Okay, so you have an influential, highly influential rater. He's influencing the people who haven't rated that often. They're just learning how to rate people. So he's going to influence the one who's not interactive with the people that you're rating, versus he's not going to influence the one who is interacting with the people that you're rating. They're both learning how to rate people.
I don't understand.
Okay.
So
I think it's
you
the-
have
it's the-
influence on that person that has
So-
influence on
so-
the other person.
Yeah,
So
it's the same
let's say
principles.
I'm a chief and I'm teaching 2 third classes how to write evals.
Okay.
And they're gonna rate this group of people. I'm gonna have more influence on the person who is not interacted with these people than I am with the person who does interact with these people.
You're dealing with a clean slate.
Right.
No other
Preconceived notions.
preconceived notions or
Exactly,
experiences.
Exactly. I thought they were interesting. Get you on time, so we're gonna skip that one. Motivation. What does this have to do with writing evaluations incorrectly? Well, you can use motivation to teach your sailors to write evaluations the right way. But before we get into this, there are those people who break the mold.
Attention. Anyone in the
Okay, that's where we started. There are those people who break the mold and prove beyond a doubt that they deserve a position. What are some characteristics of this kind of person?
Type A.
Self-motivated,
Yeah, aggressive.
doesn't need much guidance, doesn't need much
Supervision.
goading.
Okay, according to an article by David Burkus, there are 6 ways to drive employee performance and motivation, and I'm sure we've heard all of these before in our time as leaders, but it's sometimes good to get a refresher. So we have to make the expectations clear. Employees without goals will naturally be aimless. Provide them with clear and achievable goals and make sure they are measurable standards in place to evaluate the performance. Provide continuous feedback. Immediate, continuous feedback lets an employee know that their actions affect the company. Correct privately. Don't think of correcting the employee's performance or behavior as punitive. Instead, consider it a learning opportunity for the employee. Keep an open mind. Remember Dim's 85-15 rule, which suggests that a majority of performance problems are actually outside of the employee's control. If it is something that the employee can change, it's up to you to present the issue in such a way that he or she feels that they can correct the mistake. Believe in your employees. Praise publicly. Feeling underappreciated encourages complacency. Announce publicly when one of your employees has made a particularly outstanding presentation. And then make rewards achievable. Set up a series of smaller rewards throughout the year to motivate ongoing performance excellence.
I'll tell you, go back to that.
Okay?
Second one to the
Second
top.
Thank you. There you go.
You talk about correct privately, praise publicly.
Right.
I'm like 50-50 on some of that. Sometimes you need to, correct publicly.
Right.
I mean, you have it up there as a choice, but I mean, has that even been a consideration for motivation? I mean, because sometimes you do have to, break your foot off of somebody's ass publicly. And
I agree.
sometimes you can praise privately. I mean, sometimes you don't need to be rewarded in front of everybody just by doing your job.
Right.
You just mean, get over it.
I know.
Well, I had a situation like that last week.
Burp.
I had a situation like that last week with one of my students. I teach at the VA, and the student was not doing well. Wasn't listening, did not take direction well. We would tell her the same thing 3 times in a row, and she still wasn't grasping it. She shouldn't have ever left the school to come to do her externship with us. But I was having a conversation that started out with, hey, you know what, if you did this way. And she totally changed it around, asked me questions. I said, you know, I'm hearing things from all the other staff members, and these are the issues. I said, I'm hearing things. She wanted to know right then and there. Then she turned around and said I was unprofessional because I told her what the other people were saying in front of her other students.
She wanted to hear it.
She wanted to hear it. She was right there in the situation. I could have, I guess, taken her off to the side and said, okay, this is what's going on.
But see, you set the tone. And that's what you have to, yeah, see, I agree with you on that. Sometimes you have to.
Okay. Okay, next slide. I was happy. If you have any suggestions for me, I would appreciate your feedback to help me with my dissertation. Anybody have any comments?
For those folks who 10 letters in a word is big. If you're talking to people like us instead of college professors, subordinates, and you say employees, or you guys say something that's a little more towards us, and a couple of more examples would help me out. Because I listen to some of your stuff, and there's always a word that catches me. And I'm just, what does that word mean? Okay, and we're moving on, I kind of lose it.
Okay.
Forget Benjamin.
Is your
Big
audience,
words and the Benjamin doesn't understand.
That's exactly what happens. I teach class all the time, and I look at something like that, I say any big, I say intermediate, hand goes up. So you start getting that way. You used to use all these big words, and you bring them down, and all of a sudden you find out, wow, I'm sitting in this class. That's the first thing was, I've been teaching that class too long, so I half these words, I don't remember what they mean anymore.
who is your audience?
My audience is going to be 5 people that,
Like professors?
it could be professors that work in, that have knowledge of industrial organizational psychology.
They'll be all over. I'd appreciate a couple more examples.
Yeah, a couple of references, you only had 2 that supported the, what we're talking about, the last 2 references.